They're having a party in the kitchen. Huh? This cushion is making noises.
They put a whoopee cushion down. Are you trying to get away from me?
Well, whatever is on your mind, this could be your last chance.
Could be. Okay, this morning when you introduced, reminded us about all sentient beings and bringing them as we're taking refuge and raising bodhicitta. And the way you introduced it this morning almost answered my question that I had from yesterday when you introduced that. Yesterday I had the feeling of, isn't it a bit presumptuous or arrogant to think that this is for everybody? And when you described it this morning and you said by the pure vision and intention and drawn like bees to honey, that eased my mind a great deal. But then I live in the relative world with only some glimpses of pure vision. And so part of me, there's still a niggle, which is it okay to think all these sentient beings? Yes, and we're all taking refuge in these three sources, but there's many paths up the same mountain. And is it okay to think of them as in whatever way they're doing it? In our universal pure nature, in the variety of teachings, in the variety of role models and companions on the path. Is it okay to kind of open it up to honor other people's methods and their intentions?
Can you give an example?
I live in a mixed marriage. I study and I come here and practice, and I look at my husband and he supports me, but he doesn't want any part of Buddhist practice. But he's very supportive of me. But I study and practice, and I look at him and I just go, he just lives it. With equanimity, with interdependence, with impermanence. But he's taking a different path. And that's one example. There's many examples.
So what's the example there?
That he's not doing the Buddhist practice. Because I get hung up on the word Buddhahood.
Yeah.
Or Buddha nature. It's like, that doesn't sound that sounds exclusive.
Yeah.
And so I like it just awakened nature, pure nature.
What's the difference?
I don't think there is. I don't think there is.
Then it's solved.
Oh, simple, cool. Thank you.
You know, sometimes we joke because there are some kind of scriptural authority that that would say that the Buddha was not a Buddhist. Because when we're talking about isms, at the time of the Buddha, there was no Buddhism, but there was awakened mind. So these things, I think that we were particularly sensitive about them in the West, from abuse of all kinds, and I think it's natural, it's okay to be suspicious. In fact, I think that's part of the contemplative piece of the three wisdoms, is a little bit of suspicion, but the suspicion runs both ways. Like, we need to be suspicious of ourselves and also suspicious of the isms. Chogyam Trungpa used to talk about how committed he was to, and then he would say this like very kind of distinctly, to Buddha. And he says, I'm not so sure about the ism piece. But the awakened mind, he says, I feel totally committed to it. So I think amongst great beings, there's no problem here. If there's a problem here, you're not talking about a great being, you're talking about just some ordinary person. And we want to set our standard higher than the cultural norm. The questions that we have about the practice, about the philosophical underpinnings of the practices and so on, they should be always open to challenge. Like, not just today, but forever. You have to try it, you have to test it, see, so that you can say, you know, it's not really working for me exactly. Is there something I could do so that it would work for me also? So I don't see arrogance in magnetizing beings to such that they are drawn to a potential promise of freedom from their suffering. There is a little bit of arrogance from the side of, when they get here, I will fix it. That's a little problem. Because after you haven't fixed it, then you have the disappointment. So, but those things are all just a piece of the path. Like, if you already have those things in place, you don't need to practice. But we don't have it in place, so we struggle. We trip and fall down and skin our knees and get up and keep moving. Like Suzuki Roshi used to say, when you're walking down the sidewalk and you trip and fall down, he said, it's not appropriate to curse at the sidewalk. He said, in fact, the sidewalk is what allows you to get back up. It's funny, and at the same time, you think about it, that's exactly how every time we fall down, the very thing that caused us to fall down is the means by which we get back up. No arrogance. You can be joyful. There's no arrogance in joyfulness. I made you happy, you owe me. That's a problem.
Because I owe you big time.
You bet.
Karen?
Last chance.
Last chance.
Last chance, I better- It's a stupid question, I know. But,
I've never heard a stupid question, so I'm hoping that you'll fulfill your promise. And get a shot at that.
it's about the same, setting the intention at the
Yeah.
beginning of the practice,
Yeah.
bringing all sentient beings into the practice, and then you say, your instructions were to hold this intention throughout the practice. I have a hard time holding anything in my mind.
Yeah.
And I can see sandwiching, the dedication at the end and kind of bringing it that way. But I have a mind like a sieve, and things just like go through. So I don't know how to hold something like that during the practice.
Well, maybe you are holding something, but maybe it's not the thing that you want it to be or think it should be. Like if your mind is busy and you're easily distracted in the middle of that practice, then there's a kind of stability there. It's just not the stability you want.
Well, no, I'm not complaining. I think my stability is decent. I'm not talking about not having stability. I'm talking about the practice of riding the breath.
I see.
You ride the breath.
Oh, I see.
You watch the thoughts come and go.
Yeah.
You feel the body sensations.
Yeah.
You feel the spaciousness.
Mm.
And then you're supposed to also hold something, like the intention. So is that just part of the picture of you hold the intention while you're doing all that?
Yeah.
Or do you just take the essence of that experience and let it flavor?
You can do that too. It's okay. It's okay. I think if you go to climb a mountain, your experience climbing the mountain from at the base when you begin is different than in the middle, which is different than in the end, right? In the end, you might, for example, harbor regrets that you even began the journey. But in the beginning, it's blissful and it's a beautiful mountain, and so you want to climb the mountain. So I think here we have the intention, and mostly what we do is we establish the intention, which is actually for most of us not so difficult to just establish the intention. But like you say, holding it is different, and maybe then following the breath is also a little bit iffy. But let us also not forget one really big, important element. In the moment that you see the distraction, you're not distracted. We're distracted when we don't see it. By definition, a distraction is something that we didn't decide to do. I mean, can I call a distraction if I decide to think about something other than the meditation? I decided to think about it, so it's not exactly a distraction. It might have been an unskillful move to go and think about something else, but it's not a distraction. So the distraction occurs because the context is that we intend to keep our mind on the breath, follow the breath. And then we find ourselves thinking about something else. So that is a distraction. In one sense, no fault. That's also the nature of distraction, is that there's no fault there. So your mind just drifted off. What are you going to do? It's just what it is. But when we decide, wow, that's an amazing distraction. In fact, I think I could patent that idea. You know, I think virtually anyone who's meditated for more than 3 or 4 hours has thought about patenting their ideas. Some may have even succeeded on that score. But things do come up that don't come up in other circumstances. And usually they come up when we don't expect them and don't even want them. That sort of seems like the nature of the beast, is that things happen that you didn't think you wanted. And then sometimes you look at it and you think, whoa, I am brilliant. This is really something. And I mean, the Tibetans joke about this too. I think every culture jokes about the distractions in meditations. That we intend to have a very stable practice. The mind is going to rest on this. And we know what it's like when it rests on it. And our intention is that it's just going to rest there and everything's going to be okay. And then it's not. And then all sorts of things can happen. There's no harm done by virtue of an actual distraction. The harm is done at the point where we decide, I'm leaving the meditation behind and I'm going to engage in this distraction. Because if I just work on this for 15 minutes, I have a real idea here. And of course, we've now seeded, in both meanings of that word, we have seeded the stable meditation, that is to say, given up. And secondly, we've changed what we were doing to something else, and we're still calling it meditation. So there's the problem. We can't. That's not going to work for us. So I think part of the solution to this is short meditations. So I can say from my own experience, that's what worked more than anything, like really short meditations. I thought short meditations meant, because we used to do like an hour or two, so I thought a short meditation means like half an hour. So it was a little bit of a shock to hear from somebody who I felt, and still do think, was authoritative in this thing. And he said, 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Start the meditation, 30 seconds. It's almost like if you are distracted, someone will shoot me. You know, like just have this it must be. And at first, there's no relaxation in it. It's almost like you're just going to like tighten down on it. But after you do it a few times, you realize 30 seconds, I can relax a little. If you can relax in 30 seconds, you can relax in 1 minute. If you can do 1 minute, you can relax in 2 minutes. And so you just kind of like inch it out, kind of like the tide of awareness is beginning to flow in. And the secret was short sessions. I remember one teacher who came from England said 10 seconds is even better. Yeah, like just, this is not a time game. It's an issue of stability. So not very many people can have a stable meditation for an hour. That's like just extraordinary. But that's what we get the expectation. Well, that's what it should be. So the way you do it is you got to tough it out and get through it. And then, of course, you're just exhausted and you don't want to sit down again. So I thought the 10-second one was just right because I could do it any time. At least 9 times out of 10, I could go 10 seconds, relaxed, not a single distraction. And when there were distractions, they were in the last second. It was almost like I just couldn't allow myself to have success. So it was like, just, it would come in. But all of that is just kind of funny stuff. That's our mind going, and we see it. So it was a big insight for me to be told, if you see the distraction, you are not distracted like that. You have to be really clear about that. Oh, 1 second left and I was distracted. No, at the moment that you saw it, that's not a distraction. That's seeing your own experience. That's not a distraction. Distractions you're not intending to do. It's like if you intend in the middle of a meditation, well, this is a great idea, I'm going to follow that now the rest of the time. That's also not a distraction. You just intentionally left the meditation behind. So that cut, that clear difference between a distraction and just leaving the meditation behind on purpose is totally different. And the nice thing about 10 seconds is almost anyone can do it. Except Pat's raising her hand, so I'm not sure. Can't really trust
It has
this.
to do with method. Like,
Okay.
so if you want to use this as a formal practice, you'd go for refuge and then just start out with short 30-second sessions and work up to, like, wait a few minutes and do another one? Or,
Yeah.
And then, when you feel like you've done enough, then you just dedicate a merit or...
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could say, in our 40-minute sessions here, we can be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're sitting there 40 minutes.
Nobody has to know.
But, and believe me, they don't. And Lama Eric was really coaching us about this.
That's true. Yeah.
You just really hone in, very alert, almost a little tense. And then, and in that time, he said, as though this cup is going to move and you're going to catch it moving. You pay attention like that.
It's filled with boiling water and it's going to fall over.
Well,
on
that's what Trala Rinpoche writes about.
Oh, really?
That when you, when you're doing that honed-in awareness, it's as though you're carrying boiling oil right to the top of something. You want to pay that kind of
That
attention.
sounds too tight.
Well, it is, until we get stabilized. Because mostly we're very dreamy, like, this is so pleasant. And we're just floating around in thoughts. And then he would say, relax. Trala Rinpoche in his book, and Eric too, relax. And relax the mind, let it be a little more spacious. You might think space, then back to... And this is like beginner, like when you learn to ride a bike. You didn't just get on all relaxed, or when you first drove a car, you didn't just get in like, wow, man, I'm so relaxed, you know. It's like, a little bit gripping of the steering wheel. This is learning. So when Lama Eric did the shamatha retreat in this summer, was it August? He was doing 10-minute sessions, relax, actually get up, eat, walk around, come back to the cushion, 10 minutes. I found it was very helpful to my seeing what Lama Michael's talking about when I'm distracted, and or when I'm just not in the meditation, but I'm sitting on the cushion, kind of pretending, you know. So a lot of the books say 3 minutes of that very focus. Not too tight, don't be so tight, but you got to get there. So you're kind of pouncing on the distraction and seeing it and therefore not being distracted.
It's the principle of the thing. If you get kind of this, why you would do those things, it's good enough and you can manage it. It's not like a minute or 10 seconds or whatever is a formula that's going to work for everybody, but you get the principle. A short session, and if 10 seconds is too long, do 5 seconds. You know, just whatever it takes, like manage that thing. And like you would, you know, it's a hot day, so how long do you stay in the sun before you go inside? You don't have a set time. It's really hot today and tomorrow is cool, so you modify things. If the mind rests easily for 10 seconds, then move to 20 seconds or something else and see how that goes. But the mind is a habit machine. So when you get it in the range that works for you, the habit for that will be easy. And distraction is largely a habit. It's not actually some inherent defect in the meditator or in the system somehow. It's once we have the habit of not staying on it, then that's what happens. It's not a defect in ourselves somehow or in the mind. It's just a habit. The habit's not a defect. The habit is what makes it possible for us to live. I have the habit of breathing, you know. If I lost that habit somehow, I'd die. So I think that you can rely on the mind to do its job. When it finds a way to be stable for 3 seconds, it'll very quickly get that 3 seconds. And then you'll find it's very difficult sometimes to go another 3 seconds. But you already know at that point it works. All I got to do is do it, and I'll have 6 seconds instead of 3, and then 10, and then so on.
Is it better to like go to the next, you know, not wait very long, like maybe 10 seconds or something before you re-engage again? Or I could just see the pitfall of you do a 10-second meditation and a 10-minute break.
Well, and who?
Or 5-minute
You already see it.
Yeah, of course.
I see it, but
Yeah, you've been doing that, haven't you?
You're not going to do it if you're wondering about it.
no, but I mean,
There's
it
nothing
doesn't have to
wrong
be
with
a
that.
long break. It's
No.
just like 30 seconds or something.
Well, just do it. It's like I remember for years I had this thing with myself. When I get in the car, I sit for 1 minute in the car, and then I start the car and drive away. And actually, I didn't do it so well because the 1 minute wasn't scheduled for meditation. So I would just sit there and kind of mostly daydream for a minute, and then start the car and drive somewhere. Not very useful. May as well save the time, you know. But when I worked that out and got some of the instruction that we're talking about now, then I would go and I would sit for 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute, whatever I felt like, and I would just do my very best. I got 1 minute. It was helpful for me to have a little timer that I could just push, because otherwise I'm going like my minute. You can't do it. And I really needed to have that thing like fixed, and so that I knew when I started, and I would know when it was over, and that way I could just like consistently hold it there. Well, the holding it there is also a problem. Holding it there is kind of like your thumb in the dike, and you know it's gonna collapse on you at some point. When you pull your thumb out, then the whole wall of water is gonna fall down. So that would happen sometimes, is that I would try and I could hold it, but actually that's the fake method. To have to try and hold your mind to be stable, you inherently are unstable by virtue of that effort. So you really need to relax, which is where I think 3 to 5 seconds comes in. Relax. By the time you've relaxed, it's over. You did it. We don't give ourselves the credit for that thing. When I did that originally, I felt like, whoa, I see how this works. I don't have to try at all. You have to do one thing, and that's called placing the mind. You must have a starting point and a method for starting. And the method here is, okay, I set the timer, 10 seconds. Now I have to place the mind. Many teachers will say, placing the mind is the single most important thing that you're going to do in the meditation session. You need to have a starting point. So here you have something, you need to place it specifically, not just anywhere on the page, but right next to a word, instructions. So you put that there, you put your mind on the object, your breath. So you decide. Many teachers will say it should be on the in-breath. Others will say it should be on the out-breath. You know, that is just to give an answer to a question. It doesn't have any inherent meaning whatsoever. Just decide. I'm going to place my mind by placing it on the breath. The breath is coming in, I just kind of like set my mind there on the breath, and it kind of rides in. The moment that I put my mind on the breath, when I place it there, that's the beginning of the meditation. It's not 3 seconds from then. It's not 10 seconds. It's right, that's the beginning. And then you just follow it. It just rides in, and it rides out. Ding, done. Then you have to do a report card. Did I do it? Was I distracted? You have to be really honest in both directions. Some people fall on the side of, I didn't do it because by definition I can't do it. So they fall into that trap. I must not have done it. They're so shocked that they did it that they can't quite buy it. You know? So you just do it. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I think actually shorter than you can do is better, because then you get to the place of like 3 seconds. Doesn't seem like any big achievement, but I did do 3 seconds. So I'm going to drive to the market, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to get my little timer out, and I'm going to sit there for a moment. 1, 2, 3, ding, and you realize like I did it. You can't sell that short. It's like learning to ski or ride a bicycle or any physical skill that you've got. You learn in pieces. And the advantage of this is when you fall off, you have no skinned knees. So you can do it over and over and over again. And it will go from 3 seconds to 5 to 6 to 10. And you will get, if you keep at it on a regular basis, you will get 30 seconds, 1 minute, and you'll realize, why didn't I do this before? This is not a big deal, but it is a big deal in the sense of developing that skill, which is so important. It's empowering. It's empowering. You have a really bad day, physically, emotionally, some kind. You can go and you can gaze out the window and place your awareness on the mind and just see the things kind of spinning in there. It may be very difficult to watch those things for a minute, but you can watch them for 3 seconds for sure. Without twisting and turning and manipulating and doing it just becomes the object. So I think there's magic in that approach, really. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
You're well repaired, Doc.
Go ahead.
So, I think where I get confused is, like you say, you put your mind on that object.
Yeah, yeah.
And what is the mind? It's like my eyes are seeing that, and I read somewhere, or somebody said, you put 60% of your attention on that, but you're still aware of where you are. So where does the attention come from? And the second part of my question is, can you do that in nature? Just like say, I'm going to watch that duck in the water and just really focus on that and think of nothing else for 10 seconds.
Sure. Sure. I mean, there's nothing particularly profound about the breath except for the fact that it keeps you alive, you know. But anything could work. The duck in the water or whatever it is. The downside of the duck. Let's look at that for a moment. The downside of the duck is we think, ooh, a duck.
Isn't cute?
Right?
Okay, got it.
So it's
Yeah.
but if you're aware of that, now you have one of a myriad of experiments to run. What's the difference? The duck is there. I turn my back to the duck. I watch my breath come and go, 3 or 4 breaths, right? Then you turn around, watch the duck, and see, like, what's the difference? So these are the kind of real world things that we engage in and that become distractions and elements of stability and all. Why wouldn't you put your mind on a duck floating on the water or sitting? Of course, nothing wrong with that. You could watch monkeys too. You know, they might be a little too entertaining, probably. Okay, how are we doing? Yes.
Me?
Yeah. Yeah, you there. That's okay.
In thinking about whatever shows up and attaching a name to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a helpful way to notice that
Attach the
thinking
name,
about something.
like,
But what if you can't really name what is appearing at all? It doesn't have a conceptual.
your experience, you mean?
Mhm.
You don't need to name it.
But then but just recognize, oh, that's what
Can you get-
I'm not even able to recognize it.
Can you give an example?
Well, I hesitate to call it. There's light.
Light?
Yeah.
That's your experience is light?
Mhm.
Does light have a source, or what's it?
I don't know.
If you turn the lights out, is it still there?
Oh, yeah. So I was trying to figure out, did I dream that up? Did I make that happen? I don't know.
Make what happen, the light?
Whatever that is. And I've never asked anybody this before, so I.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose one could say, yeah, we make most things up, so why not that? Right. We're magicians, is the truth. We create magic shows continually. and whether they're light or dark or whatever, I think the fact to call them a magic show is to give them some value that is not inherently there. We assign value to all sorts of things, and then assign more value to things. So I don't think there's any issue with that, but can you put your awareness on that and let the awareness ride on that experience? Because in the meditation, in the shamatha meditation, the calm abiding practice, we want to be able to rest the mind naturally, not actually always hold it as if it was some small wild animal that we needed to hang on to or it would get away. We want, if it needs to get away, we want it to get away. We want to be present with it getting away, present with it staying, present with its happiness, its unhappiness, like all the elements. We just want to be present with it. Not because that's a way to fix it, but because the presence itself is key. We normally are not aware of our own feelings. We're manufacturing them and using the manufactured feeling to create more things. More feelings, more relationships, more happiness, more trouble, more whatever it is. So we want to see it as it unfolds. Just clearly to see it. So if it's light, that's cool. Why not? I would avoid labeling it. Labeling it will almost inevitably include some kind of a judgment, obvious or not. We're making some statement just by putting a name on something. Always, and this we would like. The only name we even need, and we don't need that, is that it's calm abiding, or shamatha if you want to use Sanskrit, or jine if you want to use the Tibetan, and who knows what else. But that thing should be so dull that we don't bother using it. I think I have to tell a very short kind of miracle story. I wasn't there for it, so I can lie and you won't know. But a friend of mine was invited to go to India to participate in building a monastery. And it all happened like very suddenly, and literally at the airport the invitation was made, and he in literally 1 hour got on that plane and went, and was gone for years building this monastery. And while he was there, the teacher at the monastery was quite renowned. And during the period of years that he was there, this teacher gave a teaching on calm abiding shamatha. And the teaching included the kinds of experiences one could or would have depending upon how long the mind was stable. So if the mind was stable for 5 minutes, there was some experience that was associated with that. If it was stable for hours, there was another experience associated with that. And so on, all the way up to the kinds of things that happened if the mind could be stable for a week. They went beyond a week, up to I think it was up to 3 weeks. And one of the things that he says you're likely to experience, let's say, because I don't remember the exact amount, but let's say at 1 week stability, you have the ability to know that someone is coming to see you tomorrow. At 2 weeks stability, you know who it is. And of course, since I don't think there was anyone there who could even imagine what a weak stability was. It's a little hard to deny. But I think if you can do a minute or 2 or 5, the things that come from that can easily lead you to have kind of be open to rather remarkable things if one could go this far. It's kind of like if you're thirsty and you're going to die of thirst. If someone doesn't give you water and somebody gives you a little water, you immediately have the experience of the value of that water that you took for granted before.
Could you say that again?
There was some distraction going on.
No stability.
And some abandoned.
That's that Jeff guy.
No, it was all Linda's fault.
Oh,
There's the people out there in video land.
oh, is that what it is?
They couldn't see you and they were yelling at us.
But
There were 5 of us involved.
now a true confession. But Lama Michael, I would like to go back to Karen's question, which led to a very long and erudite explanation of shamatha method. But Karen was saying, how do we hold the intention, we set the intention of I'm here doing this for and with all beings. And then do we just let go of that thought and go into calm abiding? Do we ever come back to that thought? Because you said hold that. But while we're doing shamatha, we don't conceptually hold it.
No.
No.
No, I think
Well, I was curious.
I think what actually normally happens.
Yeah, what happens?
Well, I think normally, would you agree that when we first receive those kinds of instructions,
Yeah.
and our meditation is not particularly stable, what we are able to do is to give rise to that intention, and then we move into the practice, and the intention is kind of back there.
Yeah.
We sort of left it by the road. But on the other hand, occasionally we remember we have that
Yeah.
there, but it's not really stable in one sense.
Yeah, and we don't put effort towards keeping it. To me, it's kind of like I might push one button on a machine that's just kind of the low hum, and it's just going. Now I'm doing calm abiding. I'm not paying attention to that. But the intention has been set, just like if I wake up in the morning, what I try to do in my practice, and say, today may I help all beings and may I not harm anyone. That intention goes with me through the day. I don't have to keep coming back to it.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for bringing that up, because that's my question about what is the difference between placing your attention and holding your attention.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Holding the intention of benefiting all beings is a holding, and what you're describing in the technique is a placing of the attention, and then hands off, just watch. So how do I carry an intention at the first of the practice through the whole practice? How do I hold? I mean, I think that's the question.
Yeah, I think that the placing is really important. That in a certain way, it's more important than the holding. It's more important than the stability, because it's that placing action is maybe not so critical in the case of calm abiding. But when you get into other practices, like, for example, Mahamudra and the Dzogchen practices and all, the ability to place the mind is really critical. Because what we want to do is we want to sort of take this pure drop, just to speak loosely, take this pure drop and place it in a certain spot, kind of, where our awareness is, in a certain sense, waiting for it. And then we don't want to do anything. We just want to remain aware and present. And that's those kind of advanced practices that do not have supports and shapes to look at and all, then it's very ephemeral. And so ephemeral things tend to disappear more easily. So that's where the placing becomes important. And I think in many of the traditions in the Buddhist Tantra, the teachers will start people placing the mind fairly early on, which is in the beginning is nothing more or less than just the ability to start the meditation. But you're starting the meditation by intentionally placing the mind. Not physically, but we can, it's like if you say, let's go get a hot fudge sundae, I just, without even thinking, I place my mind on the image of a hot fudge sundae. So here we want to do it intentionally. That's the difference. I want to put it there. And it's not going to stay there. It's the starting point. And I think that there's a lot of pieces around that, placing the mind. But I think it's helpful to learn to do that, even with our calm abiding. You could say, you could even use that method for the intention. I place my mind on the intention to be a cause for benefit to sentient beings. That can be done conceptually by reciting something like that, or just by putting it there with the understanding that that's what it contains. Not such a big deal. I mean, in an ordinary way, we just place our mind somewhere all the time. We're continuously doing it. The only difference here is we're slowing down enough so that we can put it somewhere specifically. And then, of course, it'll be distracted. But if you're engaging in a 10-second meditation, you may be able to get it all the way there, and where you placed it, it still is after 10 seconds. These are simple methods, right? Simple methods. They should be.
Yeah, but I'm so accustomed to focusing, so accustomed to holding a particular image or thought or goal or something,
Yeah.
I'm so following the whatever. I'm so used to holding my focus that this placing is a whole different. It's like I kind of have to place it and then sort of gradually watch myself move back.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'll want to just hold it. It's like your image of learning to ride a bike, that you do kind of have to hold yourself up and get going until the momentum of being placed there just goes on its own.
Well, let's enhance that slightly. Placing the mind is straightforward. Which is to say, you're just going to put your attention. I intend to engage in the practice of calm abiding. I intend to do that by following my breath, for example. And so I start by placing my mind on the incoming breath, kind of like a conveyor belt that's coming in. I just put my mind there and I just follow the breath come in. And at some point, I lose it, in which case I place it again. But sometime, if I do it enough, I find that it's still there after the seconds or minutes, whatever. And so you get better and better at it. But the idea is, when you place it, you're focusing. You are focusing.
You are focusing.
Absolutely.
Focus to me feels like control.
Yeah, that's right.
But control is holding.
That's right.
And we're not supposed to hold.
Well, who's we? here. It's only a moment. It's only a moment. Let's admit, it's like in order to get started, you have to decide. And deciding is also control. I'm deciding to sit down and meditate. Well, if I didn't control that much, I wouldn't meditate. So, I mean, there is a difference between the control aspect, which let's just say, okay, we're going to place the mind on that incoming breath. But as soon as it's sitting on that incoming breath, it's like, I'm done. It's kind of like you've balanced a penny on its edge somewhere and you just pull back a little bit. And if you went, that was enough, falls over. But for a moment, you gave up control. So that's what we're doing. We're just placing the mind there, then we're giving up control. And what happens after we give up control is completely unpredictable. It should be. If it's predictable, we're not really doing it. We may have placed the mind, but now we may be holding it there. We're not meant to hold it there. We're meant to like pick it up, move it there, and then what do? Just, that's it. Then I just look at the little bell clapper. After I've placed it there, I just have my awareness resting on it. It's not doing anything, it's just resting there.
So the focus is on awareness.
That's another practice. Yeah.
But if you're backing, if you're not focusing there, and you're back resting in awareness, the focus is in awareness. It's more diffuse, obviously, but
Could be
still.
no focus.
Yeah, but
Could be no focus. No focus does not mean no awareness. So we need to get you can work the language around a bit, but the idea really is to use this method as a means of remaining present. There may be an object that is the primary resting place of the mind, but there may not be. It could be that you are out walking and you just stop for a moment and are present with whatever experience you're having. It's cold, it's hot, it's wet, whatever. And you're just there with it. No focus, no intention for it to be anything. But the methodology, I think, is brilliant. You start with something very, very small and very straightforward. Placing the mind in the beginning is just bringing your mind to some place, kind of putting it there. And I think we get screwed up around it, like how do you put the mind, which is not a thing, somewhere. But we already know how you do that. I put my mind on the cup, and the next thing I know is water. Need water. We all know how to do that. So the best practices, I would step out on a little bit of a limb and say the best practices in the entire tradition of Buddhism start out with something that we already know how to do. We already know how to do it. It's simple. All we're going to do is we're going to count it, or we're going to do some little small thing that's really easy to do, and little by little that will gradually evolve into something else. And when it evolves into something else, now we have something that we want it to evolve towards. And since we learned the one thing, now we have the ability to evolve it a little further, if one cares to follow the instruction further. And gradually, we end up with a series of approaches that actually are profound, but they're comprised of relatively simple things. When they're not simple things, we don't get very far with them. The more they're things we already pretty much know how to do, the more likely we are to get good at them. Mm-hmm. We know, for example, how to be angry. So somebody says, if someone could encourage us to be angry in a certain circumstance, we would know how to get angry. But we don't know how to get out of the web once we're caught in it. So as it turns out, the exact same series of things that lead us into the anger are exactly the same things that can lead us out of the anger. So once we learn that, at a time when we would like to be out of the anger, because it won't work at the time when we're happy to be angry, then we begin to learn how to apply what we might call an antidote to the anger. Or we might see loving kindness in the anger. We might find like very profound things to look at. But back to the same thing again. It's really an issue of, can you actually rest the mind undistracted for 3 seconds, for 10 seconds, for half a minute? The rest of it you almost don't need an instruction for.
Thank you.
I need to know, I think I understand what rest the mind is. You know, like let's say it's on this little bat here.
That's
or
it.
that piece of candy.
Yeah.
And you're just looking at it. There doesn't have to be a lot of strain in that. You're
No.
just looking at it, right? But you keep looking at it. And there doesn't have to be a lot of strain in continuing to look at something as uninteresting as that for a period of time. But where is this thing of holding it? And we say we don't want to hold it, but we want to rest it there. So what's the difference? What's holding it mean? There's some sense of struggle, right? Or forcing. And we don't want that. What's the difference, though, between that and just continuing to look at that?
Any other questions?
I can look at something, but my mind is like everywhere else. Holding it would be being aware of what you're looking at.
Yeah, right. You're not letting your mind wander.
That
I agree with you. There could be struggle, there could be no struggle.
Yeah.
But one of our struggles is that we struggle to understand things in the terms that we know.
Right.
Right? We can't, when we're trying to understand something, we don't look for what we don't know. We generally are looking for the elements that we already know, and then we try to use that experience and those terms and things to describe the situation that we're in that feels unknown. But sometimes, especially when we're talking about approaches to the ultimate and approaches to the relative, we get lost in that thing. And we end up coming to some kind of a, I think fair to say, a fake understanding of the distinctions between the relative and the ultimate, which are completely conceptual, which is okay in the relative, but totally not okay in the ultimate. And so we end up confused by it. And then we try even harder to rectify that with the language that we already know. You know, it's the ultimate is kind of inherently poetic in a certain way, not without the language even. I think one I remember Kala Rinpoche once said, one of the most important single things to know about the distinction between relative and ultimate is that there's no distinction. And he said if you forget that, you'll ponder and look and not find anything. Well, that doesn't give you much footing to go with. And I think partly that's a great example. We often say, you know, we live in a relative world, but really we also live in an ultimate world. It's like where are you going to draw the line between those two? if you don't already have the understanding of it, there's no line to be drawn. Any line that we draw will not lead to clarity. So, better start with shamatha.
And it's every single tradition says it's experiential. So all these words like hold, focus, place are only going to get us somewhere.
Just use
What's
different
going to
words.
get us somewhere is sit down
Yeah.
and do it and see what happens.
Yeah, right. Like you realize that you can't control your mind. Eventually, you realize it.
Well, then you're never going to nail it down with words. And I hate that because I want to do that.
You can nail it down with words, you just won't be right. You don't need to be
You've been
right.
telling me that for years. Nail it down all you want. You won't be right. Now I'm understanding. Jeff had something. Yeah.
Well, I had two other things, but now there's me. So,
Now you got a third thing.
yeah, so I read somewhere, I think it was in a book by Trungpa Rinpoche on Shamatha and Vipassana, where he laid out 9 stages of shamatha, one of which was called continually placing.
Yes.
I think it's like number 2 or 3 or 4. There's placing, and then later on there's continually placing. And I wonder if a discussion, or not, like if you spoke about that, would that be of any help, or would it muddy everything up now?
I wouldn't know, but when I'm qualified to speak about it, I'll let you know.
I'll leave my phone number.
I can just say it is a classic teaching in
Yeah.
the Gelugin Kagyu of the nine
levels.
steps of placement.
Yeah.
Continual placement, patch-like placement. They all reach to eventually no longer needing to place.
So does that
But these are all
coincide with the
words.
Bhumis?
No, these are nothing about bhumis. This is
Yeah.
just about calm abiding method.
Yeah. Is it in Crystal Clear? Is that the book it's in?
I don't know who has it in the Kagyu.
I know it's
I don't
the
think
turning
he
of
goes
mind
to that.
into an ally by Sakyam Nipan.
Yeah,
the sun.
it's in every
in his book.
tradition.
Yeah.
I just heard a verbal teaching.
I don't think it's in Crystal Clear.
Many times.
So they all have it, but again, you're gonna get concept.
Not any better
Yeah.
concepts than what we've done today.
Yeah, and I didn't even memorize some
The
stuff.
best concepts.
Yeah, you get the best concepts, but the concepts.
I have a question. Could we attempt to clarify difference between holding an aspiration and without getting caught in, I guess the question is more, how would you hold an aspiration without getting caught in the hope and fear of trying to accomplish that aspiration?
There's no way to not get caught. Hope and fear they're really kind of the engine of samsara. And they're so key that many books and many teachers will say that enlightenment itself is defined by the utter absence of hope and fear. So I don't know that I'd worry so much about that. What was your worry again?
I guess it wasn't worry. I guess just it's helpful to just hear that that's natural to get sometimes caught in caught in the hope
Yeah.
part of the aspiration versus an aspiration can be also. I've noticed that sometimes it is free from that hope, and it seems
Yeah.
clearer and more
Yeah.
driving force and not so diluted. But I guess maybe there isn't a way to not get caught in the hope, but.
If you see it, you're not caught. So this is that same old thing again. In the moment that you are feeling a sense of angst about something, but you can't quite pin it down what it is. And pinning it down then maybe is the mistake. because you want to see it. You want to see something. But in the moment of letting go of that, you may see it very clear. And that clarity can be a little insight into the absence of hope and fear. Those two are always exactly brother and sister. They love each other. Hope and fear. They never like to be separated.
And they never are.
Never are.
Never separated.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's a story from ancient India of a bodhisattva who was known as the crying bodhisattva. Because everywhere he went, he was crying. And I remember the first time I heard that, I thought, why would I want to study this tradition? I just like cry all the time. Well, but of course, there's some like allegory in that whole thing meant to be understood. So he would go around and he would see people joyfully interacting and all, and he'd cry. And the teaching underneath it is that he could see the seeds that were being planted of future misery. And he could see that that was not being seen by the people who were having these kind of joyful experiences. And so he would cry because they did not see the misery that was coming. And therefore they would be, their suffering would be deeper by virtue of not seeing it and understanding it. These things, if we follow these trains of thought and teaching too much, it can lead us with a sense of feeling, mentally exhausted. You're probably feeling that way about now. We actually, I think it's helpful, it's good, it's nice, but in the end, we need to go back to the point of we're training ourselves. And if you can establish that the training looks like it leads to something good, like would it be good to be able to just relax the mind without being distracted for some period of time? Most of us would say, yeah, I would appreciate that without having to take drugs and things. So do you need more than that to begin? So that's okay. So begin. And then little by little, you can add on all sorts of things, a myriad of things. As we move into it, there's just endless options for practices and ways of leading one's life, so many things. But I would start with the simplest thing that we feel drawn to and then elaborate it little by little. Some people like to go and do 10-day Vipassana retreats. So that's not done so much in the lineage that we're part of, but people go and do it, and it's totally okay to do it. But if you try and do that, and you try to do 1-month retreats, and you try to do this and that before any one of those mature, it ends up just being a source of confusion. Well, Patty, right?
Yes. When I first started attending here, I asked a question regarding those of us who were fresh and thinking back to, I'm not sure how I asked the question to you, but advice if they thought back to when they were first fresh and new. So my question today would be thinking back to when you first took refuge, for those of us who are taking refuge today, what advice would you give us? Or
for taking refuge?
Yeah, or if you could speak to yourself back when you first took refuge, what advice would you give?
I don't think you want to go there. I'm not a very good example of a way to approach the refuge. Partly because I was such a renegade at that time. It was sort of, and we had no instruction. I mean, like zero. Even the word refuge, we didn't have the word refuge.
It's all Tibetan, right? It's all in Tibetan.
Yes, yes, total, all in Tibetan, 100%.
Yeah.
And you get a name in the end, and you look at it, and I remember thinking like, crappy name, jeez.
So don't worry. I mean, what can happen? Such an attitude.
I really didn't like the name. And then some years later I found out that it was the name of a famous person. His name was Gampopa. And this was his refuge name that Kala Rinpoche had given me. And I thought, wow, that's not so bad. So what is
If you'd
that?
only known that.
No progress whatsoever.
God for the grief.
Yeah, I know. Jeez. Then I felt like I should give the name back. So I think it actually, refuge is often taken as the very beginning of the path. So whatever else has happened, it's the kind of formal stepping onto the Buddhist path. That's what it is. And there are elements of it which are very difficult to understand. You know, the easy ones are the turning one's mind from relying upon all of our worldly things to relying upon, we say relying upon the Buddha. What we really mean by that is relying upon one's own Buddha nature, not the person, the Buddha, but because many people have trouble having any reliance whatsoever on their own primordially pure Buddha nature, it's also said, like, the Buddha's fine. Take the Buddha. Take the Buddha. Take those who are clearly great beings living in the world. Take the Dalai Lama. Take the Karmapa. Take this person, that person. There's at least half a dozen greats, and everybody knows the Dalai Lama. So take that. It's fine. It's more than fine. We're lucky that the world's replete with some great beings still, so we can use that. And so you rely on that instead of all the other things that we have relied upon in our lives. A funny story. Before I took refuge, I met this one man who I didn't think was a very nice guy, but he was telling me this story of he'd gone to Kala Rinpoche and asked to be part of a refuge ceremony, and he'd said to Kala Rinpoche, he said, my life is a shambles completely. It's like I'm an attorney, and I've trained myself in like cynicism and hatred and all sorts of things. I'm really tired of it. As an attorney, I tried to only look after what I considered righteous clients. The result is I'm going bankrupt. And on top of that, he was getting a divorce. So, looking bad, right? What has Kala Rinpoche said? It's perfect. It's perfect. It's exactly what you need. And I think that's really the truth. We often say that people who are the best candidates for refuge are those who have given up, those who are tired of all the stuff in the world. Even if you could move from making no money to making a lot of money, or even if you could give up caring about money and something else, it's just very difficult to step out of it. your family, your friends, they don't want you to step out of it also. So all the supports are for continuing to function in a state of bewilderment in a world of confusion. And that person is the perfect candidate for refuge. Because they're actually willing to try something else. And the try something else is rely upon your own primordially pure nature. Great. It's actually not so hard to get some sense of that. Rely upon the teachings, which we call the Dharma. So this is often, in the West in particular, this is normally where we start. We don't know who this guy, the Buddha, is, or even if there was such a person. But if the teachings themselves make sense to us, then we're prepared to take another step. You know, like, well, that looks pretty good. I thought about that. That makes sense to me. So what else could I know? And little by little, we begin to work our way into it, slow and fast. And then we begin the practices, and we start to see the connection between some of the things that looked good and the meditation that leads us there, and so on. So that's the Dharma, the actual teaching, spoken, written, practiced. That's usually the kind of the thing that makes Westerners sing for it. And then there's also this thing we call the exalted Sangha, which are like all of the great beings who live around the world currently. It's like pretty easy to visit great beings still. It's like they're not rare at this point. More rare than they used to be maybe, but still you can go and be inspired by a lot of people. So there's that. Then also many people will say that they're looking for a teacher. That's like a very common question that people raise. And I think most of us would say, wrong question. You look for a teacher, unfortunately, you're likely to find one. Unfortunately, it's not likely to be a good match. And so my advice has always been, don't look for a teacher. Teachers get grumpy. They die. They move. All sorts of things happen to leave you feeling short of what you were looking for. So I still feel like the best approach is look for a community. Communities, healthy communities, support themselves, kind of grow together. And then if the teacher there dies, there's bound to be somebody else who's there also, because you know more than one person, and you know maybe the great teacher up in Vancouver or the one over this place or whatever, and you can travel there and get things and feel like you're part of something bigger than what you thought you were part of. So refuge is literally about taking refuge from in those three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as a refuge from confusion. Not just the world of confusion, which is easy for us all to agree on. This place is really confused. But also our own confusion. It's a refuge from our own confusion. So when we feel confused, we can recognize the confusion, and then we have a whole myriad of options to play out. People to see, things to do, practices to engage in. I don't know, what do you think?
Retreats to go to.
Retreats.
Yeah.
Retreats,
etc.
I remember when I took refuge, Steve goes, "You'll be going to retreats all the time." I go,
I'm never going to a retreat.
Who would have said that?
Huh?
Who would have said that? You'll be going to retreats all this time.
Steve did.
Steve did?
And look at him now. He goes.
He's had no clue, actually.
I think
What
the
else?
only thing I would add is that refuge kind of starts working on you, in a experiential way. So whatever you get today in this ceremony, that's perfect. It will be perfect for you. And then it will just work on you, And I took refuge with Lama Michael in 1999.
Really?
At Cloud Mountain. No, that's very strange. And and I've never regretted it. That's true. That is true. It is something you will not regret. And so now what is that? What's 1999 to now? 18 years ago or something.
Yeah.
It just has such a different meaning now than it had been. But it was very impactful at that time. For me, it just felt like what Lama Michael said. It felt like I had done some things for about 4 or 5 years, some checking out Buddhism, little short retreats, but it felt like the beginning. And it will just keep growing. So trust it. It's great. I'm so happy when people take refuge. It's like so sweet. But what do I know? So. And it took me 5 years to decide to do it.
Really?
I hung around 5 years.
Wow.
I went to the first retreat with you and Ken,
Well, that was with Ken, and you still took refuge?
I know, well, that was kind of scary.
5 years later.
No, but I just didn't want to join a religion because I was so burned from Catholic days. So it was like I really love Buddhism, but it was like I am not joining a religion. So I just kept watching my friends one by one, taking refuge. And it was like, oh God, I guess I'm going to probably do this. Then it happened. It was just right. So, yeah, anyway, all good.
Okay. How are we gonna? We're gonna do something.
It's dedicated.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
What's our schedule? Well, it's 3 o'clock. Take a break, and then what? What are we doing? Huh?
What do you think? Or 4:15.
Is that what it is? Is it 4:15 or?
Yeah, 4 o'clock the retreat will end, right? That's what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have a short break and you're welcome to stay or go. And then we'll do refuge.
Any of you who are taking refuge, did you invite family or friends to come to it?
I did.